Hi guys, one of the questions I don't get very often is, hey, what do these charts actually mean? So I thought I'd put together some thoughts about what to look for when you get charts coming into your email account and you're trying to make sense of exactly what they mean. I view all these charts primarily on my phone because it's quick and easy. And when I need to do any more advanced troubleshooting, then I go to the computer. So we'll start there. You're looking at my inbox, and I've got a few examples here of reports that came in overnight. And you can simply click on them to open them and look at the data. Sometimes, if you turn it sideways, it's a little bit bigger. Usually, I just kind of stretch to zoom and say, oh, yeah, conductivity and pH and a water meter, and we're feeding biocide. And I look at the data and it looks okay. So I go on to the next one by just clicking the trash can icon and moving on. Sometimes you guys get comments from me about, hey, looks like you're out of acid, or hey, looks like a valve got shut, or something like that. And this is where it comes from. But the problem is, this data doesn't mean nearly as much to me because I'm only seeing the data as it does to you because you're seeing not only the data in the graph, but you know the account. And that is a huge advantage when it comes to figuring out what's going on. So, we're going to talk about each of these locations in a little greater detail on the computer, and I can blow up the chart and point out a few of the things far more easily. But when it comes to reviewing these charts every day, the phone does a great job. You can zoom in, you can see what the dates are, you can see the times. And if you need more detail, and I find that we rarely do, but if you do need more detail, you can go to the computer. And we'll wrap up this short video with some chart reviewing goes by quicker than others. This process plant, you can see right off the bat that everything is very smooth and uniform. We're looking at conductivity and pH and water meter. So the conductivity is virtually always in blue, pH is virtually always in red. Makeup, if there's only 1 meter, is virtually always in black. And as you can imagine, the blowdown controls conductivity, so it's in blue. The acid feed controls pH, so it's in red. And here we're looking at JustEC, the biocide, which is virtually always in green. And in this case, the inhibitor feed, which of course is proportional to the water meter input. So here, over the last 24 hours, the pH is running right where it ought to be. The conductivity is running right near the set point. It doesn't take a lot of blowdown to do that, so the load is obviously or apparently pretty light on the system. Virtually no acid feed. The AccuBlue 3.5 goes in regularly, and there was no biocide feed yesterday. It's early March, so it's probably only getting a couple days a week. This is an ammonia condenser on a food processing plant. You can see from the variables selected that we've got conductivity, pH, and two different water meters. So here, it's a lot of information to present on one chart, one graph, but from the top down, you can see the temperature. This is the last 24 hours from this morning, so it's been fairly consistent. The conductivity is running near or below the set point. One of the interesting things here is that they have a huge offset, a huge dead band on the tower sump, and so what you get is a lot of water every now and then, rather than very tight deadband systems or mechanical floats that don't allow a lot of level control variability in the sump that have a little bit of water coming in all the time. The soft water makeup is on the left axis, as you can see. And so, the high number here is maybe 2,000 gallons in this hour. And no water again until this, whatever that is, 1,800 gallons went in maybe 4, 5, or 6 hours later. And of course, you can see a concurrent drop in conductivity. When all that water goes in, the conductivity goes from up near the set point down substantially, from 2,500 down to looks like 18 something. So that's an opportunity for improvement. We've been over and over that. I'm not sure they're going to do that. The pH, we have very tight control. Of course, this is compressed, right? The pH runs around 8. because it's galvanized and extremely high alkalinity, and it's ammonia, so the skin temperatures are very high. Um, pH demonstrated itself as very reliable. If there are excursions, for whatever reason, they jump out, we get a lot of alarms. On the bottom, you can see the blowdown is periodic. You know, predictably, when the connectivity is above the set point, the blowdown is on. Here it's up again. Here there was one little spike. It doesn't look like it, but it was up there. And then here we're running below the set point, you know, during the overnight and very early morning, we had no blowdown at all. Acid comes on regularly because the pH drifts and the makeup alkalinity has to be neutralized. The Justec goes in the late morning or mid morning, perhaps. You can see the single bump, daily bump from Justec 07 on the green line. And of course, this is a process system that never shuts down. So predictably, there are no flows. Not too sure how I stopped the recording. Very typical combination. On this system, we're looking at connectivity on system 1, which is a cooling tower, and pH on system 2, which is a closed loop, presumably with aluminum components, and therefore we're controlling the pH around 8.3 or below. We have 2 water meters. Meter 1 presumably is on the tower, right? It's getting occasional makeup. Again, kind of cold days, the load is light, not at all unusual. And meter 2, meter 1 on system 2 is in this purple color, whatever that is. And it's getting only one blip here on the left axis, so it looks like it made up 300 and some, well, 290 gallons yesterday in one shot. So hard to say exactly what that is. Again, I'm looking at this stuff only from the data. You guys are looking at it from understanding the account. So where a lot of this information has limited meaning to me unless I've been out there and part of a troubleshooting mission or part of the sale of the account or whatever, I'm not going to have as clear a picture of what's going on as you guys will. So this information, when I look over it, I see big trends that jump out at me. When you look over it, you can see what's actually happening, and it means far more to you. And that is really the power of this WebAdvantage stuff and why we go to the trouble and send out these hundreds of emails every day. Pack is a plastic manufacturer in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, along the Ohio River. And they have recently undergone a big expansion, longtime customer, excellent relationship there, and they were very forward-thinking in their approach to control and information, and WebAdvantage and the Megatron controller environment made a lot of sense to them. So they've got a lot of really neat features, not the least of which is ultrasonic drum level monitoring. So some of these things are fairly typical. We're controlling conductivity in blue. We're controlling pH in red at a set point of 8.2. We have a water meter input, and we're having drum level monitoring. We're feeding 66 degrees sulfuric acid to control alkalinity. It's extremely high. It's right on the river, but they're not getting river water. It's Lawrenceburg gets well water, and it's tough water to deal with. So the conductivity in the last 24 hours, very, very tight. It is not at all unusual to expect that sort of tight performance. If you're having a lot of variation, you should ask yourself why, because this goes on for day after day and month after month looking just like that. This is a maybe 7,000, 6,000 gallon system, you know, under fairly routine load. Not at all unusual, though, in terms of plastic manufacturing. We've all seen that sort of system. And this is the level of performance you should expect. Same with pH, very, very tight. We change those sensors out annually, and that keeps the system operating as reliably as possible. So again, blowdown is in blue to go with conductivity. You can see rather uniform blowdown throughout the day. Acid feed is in red to correspond with pH, which is fairly uniform throughout the day. We had one JustEC feed in the late morning. The AccuBlue goes in routinely throughout the day. And in this case, we're also measuring the acid drum level with an ultrasonic sensor that feeds into a 4 to 20 card on the controller. Configuration was not difficult. There are a few things you have to do to get it right, but once it's been in there, ask Derek Adams about it. It's been pretty hands-off ever since. And you can see right there, you know, we've got 41.5 gallons of acid left. We started the day with 41.69. We ended up with 41.22 gallons. And, you know, that level over the course of months or however long it takes will drop down, certainly a higher load in the summer, right? But that load or that level will drop down until we reach a point where it's time to bring in another drum of acid. And it's a strong comfort level knowing what's going on because you get this type of information every morning. I include this example from SNA Molders because it has a few interesting features. Again, the usual stuff is conductivity in blue, pH in red. The acid feed, you know, we're not feeding any acid. We had one blowdown event when the conductivity hit the set point. We've had a little bit of makeup, you know, that pretty much ended. Often I will put the temperature in. Some places are more or less interested in the temperature readout. In this situation, they are interested in temperature, so it's in there. One thing you can see is, you know, the data pretty much flatlined yesterday evening, and that's not because the patient died. That's because a big snowstorm hit the East Coast, and these folks probably all went home early. So, you know, you gotta understand the data, and sometimes understanding the data means understanding the weather to go along with it. Plaskolite is a long-term customer east of Columbus, and I include this example. First of all, it's good-looking data. It's the sort of data you can look at and say, yeah, everything's fine there. And not all of these require much time to be spent at all, especially day after day after day of seeing the same things. Outliers really jump off the page at you. So for instance, if you're looking at this and you see the conductivity bouncing up and down in a fairly tight pattern right at the set point, man, everything is good there. That's as good as it's going to get. And day after day after day after day, it looks just like that. In this case, we have blowdown again in blue for conductivity in blue. We have inhibitor in this teal color, predictably going in every so often because the water meter is uniform, right? We got the water meter in black, and we didn't feed any biocide yesterday. Again, it's cold out, so it's not a daily biocide feed. But what makes this interesting is we have flow trackers on this system. So there are two flow trackers on this system. Flow tracker 1 is the AccuBlue to measure the amount of inhibitor that goes in, and you can see these little blips, these little numbers down here are the number of ounces, ounces is the unit of measure that go in, right? So this is on the right axis. So this means that, you know, whatever that is, 40 some ounces average go in every hour of JustEC or of AccuBlue 3.5 batch. So that is good confirmation that you did not lose prime on the pump, right? If the inhibitor relay comes on and you don't get any JustEC or any inhibitor going in, you get a lost prime alarm, and it shows up on your graph here as no inhibitor going in. The Flow Tracker 2 is on the JustEC, and Flow Tracker 2, of course, recorded no addition because there was no pumping in the day in question. But had there been, we would see a little bump of JustEC that went in. Flow Tracker is An interesting technology. It requires a Megatron controller. It requires a flow tracker for each product that you want to monitor the addition of, and it requires the enhanced auxiliary water meter inputs, W1, 2, 3, 4. You can accept up to 8 other water meter inputs, depending on the controller. So, typically we're looking at 1 or 2. Documenting biocide feed is getting more and more urgent these days, and so this is one of the good ways to do it. Again, it may not be for everybody because not every cooling tower customer we have has a Megatron controller. So something to think about, but great example. Hertz Salesforce Tower is a high-rise in downtown Indianapolis. And this is the data from it. You can see the conductivity runs fairly flat. Not a lot of load in the system this time of year, right? March 8th. Conductivity in blue, blowdown in blue. You can see a few blowdown events here as the conductivity hit the set point. Temperature, predictably, is fairly flat. The water meter recorded no water meter additions. The JustDeck, we fed JustDeck early in the morning, right, is typical, and this system happens to run all the time. Not all of them do, so not all comfort cooling systems can get away with feeding biocide this early in the morning, this time of year, but this one can. The Filmex precedes the JustDeck feed, so probably the Filmex would have over here and actually got missed on this 24-hour graph. Not sure about that. There were no no-flow alarms. What makes this interesting is that we have a PTSA monitor, the little dipper on this controller, which reads the concentration of PT35, the inhibitor, in parts per billion, right? So the range is 100 to 150, and we're reasonably in that range. And you can see this orange line trekking along as the inhibitor concentration is maintained throughout the day. There are a couple of spikes in here. It's not always obvious what these are. You can see a little blip every time the inhibitor feeds. The PTSA spikes up, and that is probably an artifact of the fresh addition of fluorescent dye. PTSA is a long chemical name, and that is the dye that fluoresces when exposed to the right wavelength of light, and the fluorescence is measured by a sensor, and that's what the controller is reading. So this is not only measuring the addition of inhibitor and the addition of water, but also the actual tracer concentration in the system. Not an inexpensive device, but in this case the customer wanted it very much, and you can expect to see PTSA a great deal more in the coming weeks and months. In this example of a closed loop system, it's a process plant where we're only measuring pH, and we have a very flat and consistent pH, right around 8, to control for aluminum corrosion. But here, the interesting thing to the customer was the pressure from a few critical processes. They said, "Oh, we have all these troubles integrating these pressure signals. How can you help us?" Well, by adding a 4 to 20 input card to the Megatron XS controller, we can, or this is a full Megatron, I guess, we can accept 4 to 20 signals from pressure transducers. So here they have the tower pressure, running at 40 pounds or so, the process pressure running at 72 pounds, and a chilled water pressure running at 70 some psi. And they track that, and they have alarm values set so that if they drop pressure or spike pressure, they get an alarm. And you can see they've all been, nice and flat and consistent. The loop makeup, these are on the left axis, so they're, 20 or 30 gallons at most. And I'm not sure why they make up all that water, but apparently they do. So yet another example of the Megatron system and WebAdvantage at work. This is another example of combined data on a Megatron controller from two different system cards. Custom Molders is a very typical custom plastic injection molding plant. They have a tower and a loop. So the tower is measuring conductivity in blue, and the loop is measuring pH in red. Lots of aluminum here, so the pH is targeting neutral. You can see it's occasionally struggling to get there. They have a interesting evolving water chemistry here. We've gone from feeding acid to now feeding BD6, and so arguably we are about to switch seasons or switch water chemistries again, and needing to control the pH from climbing instead of from falling. So it's not always what it was when the account was sold. This is interesting because it shows the shutdown overnight. This is a facility that doesn't always run an overnight shift, and so it's good to see that that the closed loop flow switch recorded the no flow during the overnight, and sure enough, the pH changed as the water sat in the side stream, not moving. The tower shut down as well, although interestingly the flow switch didn't. I kind of wonder if the flow switch is on system 2 and the loop doesn't actually have a flow switch. But we did not feed Belicide into the loop, but we did feed Justec into the cooling tower while the system was still running. So interesting stuff. Okay, so let's suppose that you've got some data that you found on your phone. You think, man, that just doesn't make sense. I wonder what was happening the day before, or I don't remember what I saw in the last week, but if I could see those all together, maybe I could make a lot more sense out of this. So you go to the computer, and this is what you should see. If you go to webadvantage.online, that is the address of the WebAdvantage system, and that is where your controller's WebAdvantage data will reside. You type in your email address and your password. You try to convince the server that you're not a robot, and you click sign in. You will then get the device list, and mine has a bunch of accounts on it, and yours might have fewer than that, but you should be able to find in this list the locations that you're looking for. This is the name of the account. This is the serial number on the controller. This is the type of controller. This is the status, whether it's connected or not, right? And if your controllers are not connected, you got to ask yourself, gee, why is that? Well, Anna Louise isn't connected because the system's offline. It's still early March. The dead controller in Lima is not connected because the controller was replaced and WebAdvantage just hasn't purged it out of their system. Florence 1 and 2, frankly, I don't know why they're not connected. Franklin County Courthouse is offline, yada, yada, yada. You can figure out why these things aren't connected, and if they should be and aren't, call me and let's work through the connection problems. It's rarely something that's our problem, and yet we sold them this equipment, and somebody knows that, and they're looking for information from the system. So it's incumbent on us to make it as reliable as it can, and if that means working with the customer's people or their IT department or security geeks or whoever, we can do that. And frankly, we're pretty good at working through these connection details and keeping these things online when they should be. Next, you have graphical. These are graphical and text, the two different ways to connect to these controllers. I'm not impressed by the graphic thing. It's got a sort of an energy management system. The pump looks like a pump, the tower looks like a tower, the pipe looks like a pipe. I don't know, whatever. Just give me, for my money, give me the text, and that's what I use. And reports is actually where we're going to go. Reports is a link that you can manually create what you want to see. A manual version of what is automatically generated every morning and sent to your email. History is history, and access is you can see who has access to the controller if you're interested in that stuff. So let's just quickly go to the text view. This is actually not lightning fast because the controller the server in Oklahoma has to say to the controller east of Ohio, hey, what's going on? And then the controller says, well, here's what I got. So it then builds this connection window. So now you can see that a lot of this stuff is the same information that you see when you're standing in front of the controller. The conductivity is reading 2478 on a 2750 set point. Temperature is temperature, pH is pH, ORP is ORP. You know, they put these digital inputs out there on the front page as if people use them all the time. I wish we used them more, but we don't. The timers are all here to configure. The water meter values are all here. Um, you can configure. You can do anything you need from WebAdvantage that you can do from standing in front of the controller, and it's a great thing. You can also click on this reports tab, and it gets you to the same reports that the reports icon did on the home display, the big table of your accounts. This has 3 different reports in it. We're going to look just briefly at the standard tower report. This is the one that gets emailed out every morning. And there it is. So that is the same thing that arrives in the email box of the people responsible for this account. You know, we've spent time going over these and look forward to getting them digested more as time goes by. So one last thing I want to do is jump briefly back to the cell phone. We'll wrap it up there because you can do all of this on your cell phone. You do not have to be sitting in front of a computer to do it. And frankly, it's definitely the way for us to be doing it. Okay, I probably use this iPhone interface using Safari on the iPhone more than any other interface. Although I look at these chart outputs a lot every day, I breeze through them and look for outliers and things that are going wrong so that we can head them off before they become problems. But when I need to do something different or look at the data in a different way, more often than not, it's on this iPhone interface. So this login is the same thing. I encourage you to use this add bookmark feature and make a bookmark of it. We're not going to do that right now, but logging in is the same. Username is your email address. Your password is your password. You got to convince that you're not a robot. Click sign in, and that gives you a very similar, albeit skinnier, list of accounts, right? This is exactly what we looked at on the computer. So it scrolls left to right. Sometimes it's kind of hard to tell. You might find it easier to look at in the horizontal view. I get that. If you scroll over, we're going to look at the same AMG vanadium because it's easy to get to. If you click on and recall the we'll go left to right. The name, the serial numbers in the second column, the serial or the type of controller is in the third column. Its connection status, whether it's online or not, is next. Then there's the graphic interface that, frankly, I've never used. The text interface that is very powerful if you need to make changes or program the controller. And the third one is the graph tool, the graphing results, the reports. So that's what we're going to look at. I clicked on it. Takes a second to come up. And now here are the same reports that we saw on the computer. And you can now click the magnifying glass and look at that same report here. And it now builds that same report. And this is the same thing that comes out every morning. The difference is you can change the date range on it. So you can click on the starting date, and go back, let's say, to the beginning of March, and click done. Scroll to the bottom and click graph, and it will now build that graph to include from March 1st to March 8th. So you're now looking at more data on this same report. So very powerful. And again, when I'm in the field, this is what I'm using. If I need to go into a controller and, if somebody asks me to make a change, and disable an alarm or change a setting or whatever, I say, sure, give me a minute. And I pull over and stop safely. Never do this while you're driving. And bring up the controller. Again, it's not instantaneous that we've come to expect, but not bad. This is the same controller interface that we saw on the computer. Exactly the same thing, except it's on my iPhone. I get to it anywhere in the world or anywhere in the free world. And I can now go in and change the connectivity set point if I need to, or change an alarm point. All from your phone. You guys can do this to your own accounts. You can go in and see what's going on before you get there. It eliminates surprises. It's one of the most powerful tools I've seen in the remote monitoring industry, and we've been doing that since 1996. So if you have any questions, I encourage you to ask. As I began this video, I said, one of the questions I don't get often is about what does this chart mean? And hopefully that's just because you guys are experts on all this stuff and really didn't need this video to detail any of it. Um, but uh, but if you do want some more detail, please don't hesitate to ask.